Hey everyone, my name is Crayus, also known as Average in the TShock community. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make your very first TShock plugin. And for those of you who don't know what a TShock plugin is, essentially TShock allows developers to extend the server's functionality with the use of something called a plugin. TShock itself is actually just a plugin. Going inside of the server plugins folder on a standard TShock release, you'll see a file called tshock.api.dll. This provides a lot of TShock's built-in functionality and is simply just building off of the existing Terraria server API. It works in the same way that we will also be using to create our first plugin. Here is a pretty advanced example of a plugin. Something like custom item. This is a custom plugin. It allows me to get whatever I want, really. So let's say we want a breaker blade of scale 5. There we go. Now we got ourselves a fucking breaker blade right here. So, you know, you get a massive breaker blade. You could do fucking sniper rifle, use time 0. This will give us a sniper rifle with just basically a laser rifle. But this isn't what we're going to be working on today. This is just an example of what a plugin is. So I'm going to show you guys how to get started with your first plugin ever. Your first step will be to download and install Visual Studio. This can be whatever version you want. Open it up, and we are going to create a new project here. So we can call our plugin whatever we want. We're just going to do a blank solution, and we're going to call the plugin, let's not put it here, let's put it in our GitHub. I have a lot of plugins, as you guys can see. You know, I'm a plugin developer, as they say. So we're going to call this tutorial plugin. We're going to make a new project and call this one tutorial plugin. So we're going to do a class library here, a project for creating a class library that targets .NET or .NET Standard. We're going to say next, tutorial plugin, and create. And yeah, we're going to use .NET 6.0. All right, now that we have our plugin, we have an initial class, which we're just going to rename to tutorial, or actually, yeah, tutorial plugin. You can call this whatever you want. It doesn't really matter what you call this. Just make sure that you reference it correctly as this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some dependencies. So we're going to go to manage NuGet packages and TShock. We're going to type that in. And then we're going to download this one here. And I accept. Okay, now we're going to do the same for TSAPI. All 3 of these are going to be needed. And you might be like, oh, there's not 3. Well, you also need OTAPI as well. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. Maybe in the future this will be the right one, but for right now it's OTAPI.upcoming. So we're just going to go here, delete that, and OTAPI.upcoming. Because this is Open Terraria API 3, which TShock and TSAPI both depend on. This one's Open Terraria API 2, which would not work. It's not really the same thing. Okay, so now we have our plugin. So we're going to go up here. We're going to do using, and then Terraria. Using system, using TShock API, using Terraria API.server. Okay, so this is probably all we need for the very beginning here. And we're just going to create a little plugin that will, I guess we're going to create a plugin that has a command in it. And that's probably it. We're just going to kind of play around with a command. Okay, so we are going to set the API version, which is kind of the first thing that you should do. The current API version is 2.1. So just like this is how you set it. And then we need some overrides. So public override string, and then the name. This is going to be your plugin name. So when it loads up, this is what it's going to display. Why is this not? Oh, I forgot. We need to mark this as a Terraria plugin. So the reason why it's throwing this exception is this error is because we also need to do the following. So we're going to do tutorial plugin, main game, base game. And so the other reason why this error is happening is this requires a override void initialize. So basically this is just initializing the plugin. This is the first thing that it'll do. So we can now begin to set our plugin details. So our name is just going to be tutorial plugin. This will show up in the console when you're loading up the plugin. Then we're going to do a public override version. Now this is going to be the version of the plugin, and I think this is also displayed in the config. If you do base.version, it's just going to get the version of Terraria, I think, or maybe not. I'm not sure really what this does, but we're gonna set a new version number by saying new version, and then in brackets we're gonna go 100, or you can do, you know, 0.1, or you can do 2.0, or whatever the fuck you want. You can do 1.4.6, like whatever the latest version is for you of Terraria, but we're just gonna go simple. We're gonna go 1.0. You can put your author name, so public override string author, and then we'll just do average, put your own name there, public override string, and then we got description as well. Oops. Description. So we're just gonna say a sample plugin for beginner TShock developers. Okay. And I think that's pretty much all the ones you really need. Update URL. Apparently this is deprecated, so don't do this. There's no point in doing it. It really does nothing. Alright, so now we have all that done. We are going to do one last thing for the setup here, and this is going to be our disposal function. So this is what happens when basically either we stop the server or we need to get rid of some things. So this is where we're going to deregister all of our hooks, and essentially when the server closes, this is what it will do to kind of clean up a little bit. So yeah, anyway, putting that at the bottom there. Now we can begin working on the plugin. So the first thing that I like to do is create a server hook. So something we can do up here, we can do using TShock API.hooks. This just makes hooks a little bit simpler to type out. So if you want to use a TShock hook, now you can do like player hooks dot, instead of having to do TShock API.hooks dot, you know, whatever you want to do. Now you can just do player hooks, whatever hook is in TShock API. But we're not actually going to use a TShock hook just yet. We're going to use server API.hooks, and this one is going to be game initialize here. Now for a server API hook, we also have to specify, or sorry, initialize it like the, oh, sorry, I forgot. There needs to be a register here. So you need to game initialize.register this, and then, so this points to the plugin, and then we put our method here. So we're just going to do, this usually happens when the world gets loaded, so I like to call it world loaded. And then right click this, quick actions, generate the method. It automatically generates it for you. It's super awesome. And if this doesn't exist and somebody, you know, this hook is activated while you haven't actually implemented it, it'll throw an exception in the console. To explain what a hook is basically just a call to a function when whatever kind of event happens. So if the game gets initialized, it's going to call this function. If I do server API.hooks.server leave, this is something that happens each time a player leaves. So if I had a method here for a server leave event args, whatever, then I could register it and call this when a player leaves every time. So right now this will just run when the game starts. This is where I usually like to do configs and stuff, and this is also where we are going to define our commands. So now that we have this, what kind of command do we want to implement? Well, let's make a command where it gives the player a completely random item. So we're going to do public, and I like to do public. You don't have to do public. You can do private. You can just do a void. It doesn't matter. I like to do public though, so it's accessible to pretty much everything. Anyway, public void, and we're going to do random item. And we're going to put command args inside of that. So basically what this is, it's an object type command args. And if we press control and click on it, we can actually see everything that's within the args object. So we have a message, we have the player that sent the message, we have parameters that go within the the command, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. And we get the T player as well, everything you'll need when a player executes a plugin. So the first thing I like to do is I like to check, is args.player.active equal to true? Because if it's equal to false, we're just going to return, because the player is not on the server. If this happens, it can't actually find the player on the server. So if a player that can't be found runs this command, it's going to throw an exception. This basically just reduces the chance of an exception happening. Something else we can do, if we want to make sure the player is logged in, let's say, we do args.player.loggedin equals to true. So now what goes inside of here will only happen if the player is logged in. But we don't really want the player to be forced logged in to use this command, so we're not really gonna force the player to log in for this. Okay, now something I like to do, but you don't have to do this, is just set a variable to the player. So TSPlayer is args.player. Now basically what this does is it gets the TShock player and it just sets it to this variable. So now instead of typing in args.player, you can just type in player.whatever, and you have all the methods and the variables, everything that you'll need. Okay, so for this command, all we want it to do is give the player a random item. So we're going to generate our random item. Basically how we're going to do this is we're going to create a random called rand new random. So basically this is a I think it's a system.random object. So it's implemented from system up here. If we remove this, we actually won't be able to use that method anymore, I believe. Okay, never mind, I guess not. But anyway, it's from a system, and basically this allows us to do rand.next, which is a random number generator, and you can do it within a range, so 0 to 100 per se. So this will give us a number either 1 to 99. So this is how we can get a random item ID. So that's what we're going to be trying to get, is an item ID. So we're going to do int, which is a non-floating point number. Basically what that means is there's going to be no decimal values, and because Terraria IDs, they don't have decimal values. Like if I do I/1, I get an iron pickaxe, but if I do I/1.1, it's going to say invalid item, because that doesn't exist. There's no 1.1. There's no decimals. So we can safely use an int without there being any exceptions here. So we're going to do int item ID. And a lot of people like to use camel case. Usually for my code, I do use camel case. But for the sake of the readability, I kind of just want to make it really simple for you guys and easy to understand. So we're going to do item ID equals rand.next. So this is a call to rand and then the method next. And in here, we're going to do 0. So it could be... the thing about Terraria is that it actually has negative values for the random items. Sorry, not the random items, for its IDs. I think it goes up to like -17. I don't think there's anything after that, but I could be wrong. No, okay, I guess there is. There's actually quite a lot, and it's like, I don't really get why that it happens, because I think these were things they meant to implement earlier in the game, but then they added it later. I have no idea, because as you can see, this actually does have 2 values. So no fucking idea why it has negative values for item IDs, but we're just gonna ignore it basically. And anyway, so it's gonna start at 1 because item ID 0 is non-existent. And then we're gonna do item ID dot, item ID dot count. And I just realized this is a terrible name, so we're gonna call it item ID. We're gonna do camel case because item ID is actually a method in another library called terraria.id. So basically, it's going to show an error because it's not actually using this yet. So right click, quick actions, and then using terraria.id. So like that. Okay, as you can see, now we have the item id.count. And if we actually go control and click this count, we will see 5456 is what count is set to. Now, what does that mean? That is the total count of all item IDs in Terraria. So 5,460 or 56. That's what it's doing here. So what this will do is it'll pick a random number from 0 all the way to 5,456 as displayed here. And yes, this does get updated for the version, so you don't have to update it or anything. This comes from OT API, so the Open Terraria API server. Or why the fuck did I say server? No, not server. Okay, so now that we have our item ID, we are going to give the item to the player. So we can do TS player dot, or we don't need to do TS player, sorry. Player dot give item, and then we can begin. So we're gonna do item ID. So this is, so if you hover over give item, it'll show you the parameters that are required to go inside of here. So item ID is going to be the type, so int type. Then we have a stack. So we're just gonna give the player one item, but if you really wanted to, we could do, and I guess since I'm already writing it, we might as well do it. We can do a completely random stack, so 0 to 9,999. And then we can also add a prefix ID. And if you don't know the ID of the prefix, you can actually do prefix ID dot and then whatever prefix you want. So let's just put, I don't know why there's 2 legendaries, but we're gonna put legendary 2 on that bad boy. Okay, and then let's say we want to send the player a message. So we're going to do player.send message. So the thing about send message is, as you can see, it'll have an error by default if you just type a message in here. Now the reason why that is because it's expecting a second parameter, which you can see here. It says string message, and then it wants a XNA framework color. So we're just going to have to add a comma here, and then we're going to do color. And as you can see, this won't be implemented by default. So we're going to right click, quick actions, and then using Microsoft XNA framework. And now it'll turn green because it's a recognized implementation. So color dot, and then we can select any of these colors. We can also do new color and then make an RGB color. Just like this. So 1, 1, 1. But I'm just gonna, usually what I do is I just do color dot and then whatever color I want. So we'll do Alice blue. I'm not really sure what that is, but anyway. Okay, let's say we want the player name to be put into the message. So we're going to put a $sign in front of the string. What this allows you to do is string interpolation. And what that means is we can put variables inside of these curly brackets. So if I want the player name, I can do player.name. And this won't show up as curly bracket player.name, curly bracket. It'll show up as the actual player's name because it retrieves the variable. Let's say I didn't have this $sign. As you can see, it is no longer color coded. Now it'll just display like that. So the $sign is very important. This is the best way, in my opinion, to do strings inside of text. I used to do, plus, and then I used to add the variable. Or another way to do it would be to, I think, do like something like this, or not like that. I think you could do this and then just put the string at the end, or the variable at the end. Anyway, I don't know, but we're gonna do player.name has been given. So this is just gonna send directly to the player. I'll talk about sending a global message probably later in this series. But we're going to do player.name has been given, and then we're going to get the item ID. So we can use something called TShock.utils, which is actually a big set of utilities that TShock is implemented by default. Bless the TShock developers. So we can do TShock.utils.getItem by ID. And then we're going to slide that ID in there. So we're going to do item ID. Oops. So item ID is now in there. And then, so this actually retrieves the item class. So if we were to do a new item, this is what it'll end up retrieving, which is not a string. We want a string which is text because we want the item name. So we're going to just do dot and then name. So that's a very simple fix. So they've been given that item, and then we're just gonna add an exclamation mark, I guess. And then usually when you want the script or the command or what your line of code to end completely, we're just gonna do return. What that means is it basically just stops the execution. So let's say there was code after this code would not run. So that's why this works up here. So if the player argument is, if the player is not active, it returns and it doesn't execute any of this code. So that's what's going on here. That's why there's a return at the end. And anyway, so that is our command implementation of random item. Now let's go up here. And so this is technically just a function. There's no calls to this. So if I do /random item, nothing will happen. That's why we need to register the command. So we're going to do commands.chatCommands.add, and then we're going to do a new command. And we're going to call this command. So this is actually going to be the first parameter is the permission node. Now, what is a permission node, you might be asking? In TShock, if we do group list perm and then like default, for example, we can see a list of every permission that the default group has. So let's say tshock.warp. That will give him access to /warp. So without tshock.warp, he actually wouldn't be able to do /warp. And so that's exactly what's going on here. We can make up our own permission node. It can be anything you want. It can be even one string, so like A. So if I add A to the player, he'll be able to run this. But we're just gonna do TP. I usually like to do the first letters like an acronym kind of. So tutorial plugin TP dot, and then we'll do random item, or I guess we could just do tp.ri is probably the simplest. You want to make it pretty simple because it's kind of a hassle to type out a bunch of permission nodes if you've ever done it. So then we're going to put the method in there. That's going to be the second parameter. And then the last parameter is also going to be a string. However, the cool thing about this is that it can be as many strings as you want. So we can do random item, we can do RI, we can do random I, we can do item rand, we can do whatever the fuck you want. All of these, if the user enters it, so /RI/random item /whatever the fuck, it'll work. And it'll all go to the same method. Obviously ended off with a semicolon. And we really only have one command here, so we only need to put one thing there. I mean, there's nothing else that we're doing in this plugin. And then this, what I like to do for the disposal of hooks, you just copy it, paste it, and then instead of register, just type in deregister. And we are good to go. This plugin should be fully functional. We are going to go up here, press build the solution. Give it a second, and if there are no errors, which there shouldn't be any errors. All right, so it has succeeded. We're going to go to our, we're going to make our way. Actually, a really easy way to do this is just right click your project and then go open folder in File Explorer. Now we have it here. So go into the bin folder, debug net 6.0, and then we have our tutorial plugin.dll. So we are going to get up a TShock install, and we are going to copy tutorial plugin and just put it into server plugins and start it up. Okay, and we're going to start the server up, and this is on my local host, so we're gonna have to actually change servers here. Okay, now we're in. So let's test our command and see if it works. And it failed. Okay. So this is a natural part of plugin development. You know, things like this always fucking happen. So to understand why did it happen, all it says is command failed. Check log for details. We need to go into the log file. We need to go TShock logs and go here. Now this will tell us exactly what is going on. Field not found, Terraria ID, item ID.count. Now, why the fuck isn't this working? To be completely honest with you guys, I don't know, because I have actually used item ID.count before. So the fact that it's not working is a little bit strange to me, especially because it is clearly implemented in the code here. So if we do count, we can actually see 5, 4, 5, 6. Things like this will fucking happen all the time. If you don't really know how to fix it, and you actually know the value, all we have to do is just type in 5, 4, 5, 6 and save it, and then we'll just start it up, you know? So that's pretty much the simplest fix for that. We just put the plugin in there after we build it again, open TShock server. I guess we need to stop this first and then open it again. Because item ID.count, all it really is an integer anyway. It's just the length of the item IDs. So now, /RI, and we get a random item with a random stack size. And as you can see, it says average has been given, Goblin Scout banner. So we can do as many as we want. And as you can see, they are all random items. We can do random item. We can do item rand. And just to show you that it does actually use the permission node, we'll change our user group from superadmin to default. We have some stack sheet detections because these are over the stack size. But that's fine. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Anyway, so now if we do /RI, we don't have access to the command. So we can go here, group, add perm, default, and then tp.ri. And now RI works. Hooray! That was our plugin, and that's all that there is for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I don't think there are really any other plugin tutorials out there. So this is going to be kind of a long-running series where we just kind of fuck around with TShock plugins because, I don't know, I have fun developing these things. Even though they don't really do anything, they don't really mean anything, it's still fun to fuck around with code and kind of have a blast of a time, you know? Anyway, hopefully this helped you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, stay tuned.